Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. So what is the outcome of patients who benefit from ECPR? This is my conflict of interest slide. I'll let you a few seconds to go through it. Well, this is the latest. This paper has been published a few weeks ago, a few days ago, is from the ELSO registry. First information here, looking at the numbers of patients who have been implanted with an ECMO machine for CPR has been increasing over the last few years. But looking here at the survival, this is quite stable, around 30%. You have to remember that these are voluntary registries, so the results which are published here combine in-hospital and out-of-hospital cardiac arrest patients, and probably the result might be over-optimistic as a whole. So first, let's review the results published about patients who have in-hospital refractory cardiac arrest. You've already seen that paper from Chen, which is probably the best evidence so far for in-hospital is a study of patients aged up to 75, witnessed cardiac origin. The patients have been on CPR for more than 10 minutes, and they were compared to a series of patients who got conventional, and they matched the cases in control with a propensity score. This is the results showing that the results are much better for those patients who have ECPR. And overall, the survival is close to 30% for those patients who have ECPR, is less than 5 for those who got conventional. Once again, you have to remember here in that study that there was kind of threshold of 60 minutes of total low flow time, above which the mortality was increasing exponentially, questioning the utility of the strategy in these patients. There was also data on the long-term outcome of the patient, especially about the neurological outcome, which might be actually the real outcome to look after in these patients and not only survival. And when looking at the numbers here, it's not as good. At 1 year, those patients who got a good neurological outcome, including CPC 1 and 2, was around 20 for extracorporeal CPR and around 10 for those who got conventional, so and was not significant in that series of patients. The other paper published a few years ago, it's a larger series of patients, and in that paper, they also matched the cases in control using a propensity score. And when looking here specifically at patients with minimal neurological impairment, there was still a benefit. And it's the first paper which showed clearly for in-hospital cardiac arrest patient that there was a benefit for the strategy of ECPR. So when looking at this paper, you should have a close look at the methods, how they did it. What was the validity of the application of that strategy? So the ECMO team was available all the time, all the days, nights. They were mobilizing interventional cardiologists, surgeons, ECMO technicians. Machines were available everywhere in the hospital, including cath lab, TCU, or the decision to go for ECMO was quite speedy. The patient had no ROSC after around 10 minutes of CPR, recurrent arrest, and the ECMO cart during the day was mobilized within 5 minutes to the patient bed, and they were able to set up the device within 10 to 15 minutes. So overall, in hospital cardiac arrest during the day, they were able to set up the machine within less than 30 minutes of collapse. And this is probably one of the key issues here to get better results. So now let's review the literature about out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. This is a true population of patients which is highly challenging here because we have to deal with the patients on the streets, for example. And I love that paper. I love that paper. This paper from JAMA Internal Medicine is from a huge registry from the US comparing patients who got basic life support with the firefighters, for example, here in France, to other patients who got advanced with medical staff. And guess what? This is your numbers. Guess what? Those patients with cardiac arrest, who were rescued by basic support with the firefighters, with the paramedics, they had better outcomes. They had better outcomes compared to those patients who got advanced. The message here is you need to scoop and run the patient to the closest ECMO center if you want to go for ECPR in these patients. Whatever technology you will use, even if the patient is going to recover from cardiac arrest, scoop and run the patient to the closest hospital, even if the patient has ROSC, is associated with better outcome. Well, this is very, very important data. Next, what are the results published of a series of out-of-hospital cardiac arrest? Most of these papers come from Japan as of now. There's some coming from other countries, but most of them come from Japan, where the system is quite different, for example, from what is organized here in our country, in France. They are able to scope and run very rapidly the patient to the closest hospital. No advanced CPR, no doctors in the ambulance here, only paramedics. And look here, they can rush the patients within 20 to 20 minutes to the closest hospital. Here's the first series of patients, 66 ECMO patients. They got better survival as compared to patients who got conventional, but when looking here at the neurological outcome, there was no difference. 22% survivors at 3 months with ECPR to less than 10 with standard, but it drops down to 11%, even 10, when you're counting those patients with good neurological outcome. This is the latest from Dr. Makeva in Sapporo, Japan. A huge series of patients, 53 ECPR patients. Once again, they compare the outcome to another group who got conventional. This is very important here to look at the tables. Look, these first line here, time from arrest to hospital. On average, half an hour. They were able to drive the patient on CPR for refractory cardiac arrest within half an hour. And this is why they got quite good results. Mortality survival was close to 30 at hospital discharge in at 3 months, less than 5 as expected for the other group. But once again, the several performance CPC 1 and 2 was only 15. So you have 30% survivors, but half of them have major neurological impairment. Still was significant in that bigger series of patients. So you will find in the literature at least 5 meta-analyses published over the last few months, gathering data from all these pre-hospital series of ECPR patients. Overall, survival is close to 30%. Survival with good neurological outcome between 10 and up to 18% in these series of patients. But these results are biased because it's within a specific a system of care and a system in which the paramedics are rushing the patient to the closest hospital. So this is not that simple. This is not that simple. You have to go to real-life data, and this is real life, published by a group in Lyon, in France. Out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, 68 patients. So 2 groups here. One group who had no ROSC, some of them at some ROSC. Low flow was similar, not that bad though, around 84 minutes here. And survival to discharge was a little bit better here, but no patients had a good neurological outcome in this group. It was 15% in that subgroup of patients. We also have data from the emergency department in La Pitié, this series from Morgan Le Guen, 51 patients witnessed out-of-hospital cardiac arrest. This study was performed a few years following the publications of the guidelines, the French guideline, to care for these patients. In what said at that time said we could go up to 100 minutes of CPR to set up the device in these patients. But what happened in these series of patients, that the mean duration here of the low flow time was close to 2 hours, explaining why the results was so bad. Only 2 survivors here, mortality 95%. So I do believe now we should deny the indication of ECPR, providing that the time from collapse to the time the ECMO machine is running, not the time the surgeon calculates, the time to a fully functional ECMO machine. If this time is more than expected to be more than 1 hour, I think you should deny the indication in these patients. We also have data from Korea, South Korea, very recent paper published a few months ago, a huge series of patients here. And in that registry, there was 320 patients who got ECPR. And guess what? There was a benefit of therapeutic hypothermia in these patients, a benefit of the early reperfusion therapy, but no benefit at all of the ECLS strategy in that series of patients. So how can we improve the outcome of the patient now? This is one cartoon I borrowed from Mathieu here, one of the talk he delivers in our diploma of ECMO in La Pitié. So we have plenty of patients who might be implanted, including patient in Père Lachaise here in Paris. And I guess the results are going very poor in these patients. So who should benefit from ECPR? The age is very important. For sure, if you start the program, should be less than 50. The patient should have witnessed, for sure, no flow of less than 5 minutes, for sure. The patient should have received bystander CPR. Initial shockable rhythm should be the rule. And actually, when looking at the study from Lyon, those who had no shockable rhythm, mortality was 100, whatever you do. Ensure efficient CPR, it was discussed before, it's very important, of course, and probably also very important here, the collapse to ECMO time. This is the French guideline. 100 minutes was a rule at that time. I think we should change the paradigm here. We should decrease that time to 50 minutes. We should rush the patient, and probably with paramedics. Or the other strategy is to move the ECMO machine to the patient on the field. This is feasible. I do believe that if you have 3 ambulances, 20 people going on site, this is feasible. This might also be safe. But is it reasonable? No. For sure, this is not reasonable. This is not cost effective. This is not reasonable, especially in a big city where you have many centers in which it's possible to set up the machine and it's possible to rush the patient within 10 to 15 minutes to that type of centers. We have the guidelines from the big societies published last year. ECPR may be considered from these guidelines, but there is very low evidence so far, so they are advocating for controlled clinical trials to be conducted in that population of patients. And for sure, we need to have more data. We need to organize this activity. We tried to do that a few years ago. It was the Paris Marathon. This is 2010. At that time, we worked with the SAMU to move an ambulance on site. And it was a beautiful sunny day. And there was a surgeon and a SAMU doctor waiting for the client in the ambulance. And actually, they got a client. Was a 45-year-old male who had cardiac arrest. The guy got bystander CPR. The ECMO machine was primed very rapidly in the ambulance. The ECMO was initiated very rapidly, only 45 minutes after collapse. Anti-reanimation, the guy got PCI. The ECMO was weaned after 10 days. Everything was okay. But the patient did not recover. He had brain encephalopathy, anoxic encephalopathy, probably because the first part here of the chain was lacking, was missing. The initial resuscitation was failing. So in conclusion, yes, refractory cardiac arrest patients, they might benefit from ECPR. For sure, in a hospital where it's very easy to get very short times of resuscitation. Out of hospital cardiac arrest, we need to change the paradigm here. We need to go for an ECMO decision very rapidly. We should scoop and run the patient to the nearest ECMO center, probably with an ECPR machine, because it's much easier in the ambulance when you drive to have the patient on the machine. And clearly, you should deny the indication if the collapse time should be more than 60 minutes. This is my last slide. Thank you.